right, good evening, everyone. And just like every other week, I tell you, uno momento, por favor, and we shall. I got to do something else because I'm dumb. I don't think I formatted the card. Oh, it is formatted already. So let me hit the record button here, and we shall proceed with the Freedom Talk.
In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we are back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much for joining us again this week. Appreciate each and every one of you. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, but for those of you in the live stream especially, you can see that Brandon is wearing one of the new T-shirts. Now the one he's wearing says "Criminals in Action for CIA," which I like it. And then on the wall behind him, you can see the Ron Paul T-shirt that was also done. He's going to pull up the webcam nice and close. And Brandon says they are good quality, so it's not the cheap like print on the shirt. His fiance did the old stretch test to see if there would be lines around the print. The print flexes with the shirt, so it doesn't look awful when it flexes around. So now that we know these things seem to be of good quality, we'll get that store opened up, and then I will start posting the link in the live chat and in the video description and podcast. What is going on with my my YouTube channel? I forgot I changed the password, and it's really angry with me right now. So I've got to type that in so I can keep an eye on the live chat. You know, you'd think I'd have done that before the show started, but I guess I'm not that smart. And anyway, so yeah, the T-shirts are looking good, and I'm really happy. We're both really happy with the quality of these things, and it is good to know that we didn't go through all that trouble, especially Brandon, who designed them all, to go through all that trouble and then to be crap T-shirts, right, Brandon? So yeah, it's a good thing that it's not they're not crappy T-shirts.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
All right, yeah. And no, also these have both been washed once. So the quality, I also did a wash test to make sure, and dried them actually on heat. So washed and dried, did not lose quality. So looking good.
Looking very, very good. So anyway, folks, as when all the products are live, I guess you'd say, we will let you know, and then I will put that again in all the video descriptions. There will be a link in case you want to buy one. They will be listed on the site, and we're going to add a couple more. Sam and Trish had some ideas for some T-shirts. One says everything government touches turns to crap, and another one will say if they can tax your property, you don't own it. So those also will be coming up here in a not too distant future. Brandon's a newer father, and I don't like, I'm not rushing him to get these things done because he's better at the graphic arts thing than I am. So I know he's doing the work, and I'm not going to be like, come on, bro, get with it, when he's got quite a young baby at home. So I'm not gonna put that kind of pressure on him. So anyway, folks, I guess to get started for this evening, for those of you who have listened to the show for any time at all, know how much I've railed on, the regulation of marijuana, Amendment 3, all these different things. And you've also heard me and Brandon even just rail on Senator Nick Schroer, because the guy loves to talk about what a conservative champion he really is, which he's not, clearly. But he loves to brag on the fact that he's a conservative champion. And then he's got, now I'm trying to find, okay, so he pre-filed SB 54, and this creates provisions relating to cannabis. In this bill, It says, now this is just the current bill summary, which I pulled up at the beginning of the week. I think it was like Monday or something. I posted a little, put a little post on X about it. But it says this act establishes the Intoxicating Cannabinoid Control Act. Under this act, intoxicating cannabinoid products shall be considered as marijuana and regulated as marijuana is regulated by the Department of Health and Senior Services under the Missouri Constitution. The department shall collaborate with the Department of Public Safety to enforce the provisions of this act. And that is the vomit-inducing words in this is under the Missouri Constitution. So the Constitution, and this is another reason why Amendment 3 was so bad. If this bill would get through, which I know there's going to be several Republicans that will push on this bill after what happened when I think it was DHSS sent, a group of people to a VFW hall on 9/11 to try to confiscate adulterated beverages. But the problem herein is that the state constitution has something in it, and bills will be added into the statutes that punishes and limits the people, which is not supposed to be what the state constitution does. It is there to limit the size, scope, and power of government and keep it within the confines of certain boundaries. And now it's being used against the people. So Nick Schroer, the supposed conservative or Republican champion, who, by the way, in 2023 voted constitutionally 39% of the time, now wants to use the Missouri Constitution. He can say that he's writing a bill, but this bill falls in with the Missouri Constitution. So Nick Schroer, the conservative, the big bad conservative, I got a lot of words for this guy that I can't say on the radio, is going to use the state constitution to limit you and I and people who, and producers, they're going to use this to control producers and consumers. It has nothing to do with limiting the government. Brandon, what say you, Brandon, on this stupidity?
Well, yeah, it's anytime you're giving the government more power for regulation, everyone should be hesitant, first of all. But with this in particular, it would be like if you wouldn't allow gas stations to sell cigarettes, so you had to go get them at a tobacco store only. It just doesn't make sense. If you're over 21 and you're able to buy something, who cares where you're buying it? Really, it shouldn't matter to anyone. It's just another excuse to funnel it through these dispensaries to give the people who own these dispensaries. I'm sure they're paying off these lawmakers, and I'm sure that's why they're trying to funnel more business through the dispensaries instead of allowing people to sell like Delta 8 products at gas stations. It's all a big corrupted money grab, and I'm not shocked a guy like Nick Schroer does it. He's just a poser, in my opinion. He poses on Twitter or X that he's some conservative champion, and he always likes to, I'm so pro-Trump and this and that and all the, but deep down, he's just a guy who takes money from lobbyists and acts on their behalf. So it makes him a very classic Republican.
And that's the thing that these guys really need to figure out, I guess you'd say, is, we hear the left, a lot of people on the left say that Republicans are they're just worried about corporations. They're worried about big business. Well, in this example, they're really not wrong, because they clearly, the big money interests in cannabis are the ones that pushed Amendment 3 through. There's a lot of out-of-state businesses that sunk money into this campaign to get Amendment 3 passed because they know the money's going to flow through their pockets. And you had this lottery for licenses. Well, if you're the big companies, you'll dump a whole bunch of I guess if you're looking at this like scratcher tickets, they're going to buy a whole boatload of scratcher tickets and flood the lottery system with their company name that gives them a better shot at getting their name drawn to open up more dispensaries. And Nick Schroer is basically doing the bidding of the big marijuana industry here in Missouri by putting this up, and he's hurting small businesses. You can use this crap. It's because of the kids all you want. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Now, here's the problem, though. Apparently, there were some kids that got a hold of some of these look-alike candies, like Sour Patch Kids or something, right? And they ate a bunch of them, and it messed them up. Didn't kill any of them, but it messed them up. Made them sick, right? And so they're using this to push legislation like this and enact these regulations. This is where, unfortunately, some irresponsible parents or the government uses a few irresponsible parents to make rules and make this blanket policy that covers anybody that would want to buy these products. And this happens time and time again, where a politician will use the children. We have to protect the children. And then a few people do something dumb, and then they just put a full blanket approach on everything. And I hate it. This happens, but this happens all the time. This is not anything new that these politicians do. It's an unfortunate part of the system that we're stuck in, where these jackholes use these very few things that, very few bad examples, and say, well, clearly everyone in the state's retarded when it comes to Delta 8. So you're all retarded. Now you have to go to dispensary. And imagine what the price of these products will be in a dispensary because they're regulated. They'll sell a lot less because it's going to be way pricier than going into a tobacco store or a convenience store and buying them. The price is going to go up drastically. So they're cutting, in essence, they'll cut some of these guys out because fewer people will buy the product because it's more expensive, and then they'll just put them out of business, and the only people left are the people who are selling marijuana products, which is exactly what the big businesses want to begin with. So Nick Schroer, conservative champion, sucking up tight to big marijuana business here in the state, and it's vomit-inducing, to say the least.
Yeah, to add on to what you were saying at the end there, it is to the detriment of the people that he's doing this. Because now if you want to go buy, I'm not certain about this, but I'm assuming that if you take these Delta 8 products and force them through a dispensary, then you're forcing everyone to pay the state sales tax, the county sales tax, or the marijuana tax. So the state marijuana tax, the county marijuana tax, and the city marijuana tax. So you're adding 10% on top of whatever you're buying already, sometimes more than 10%, but like around 10% added on cost to you, and you made it less convenient. Because I don't know if how often, I know that when you go into a dispensary, you have to give them your ID, and then you check in, and then they check your ID again at the end. So then you also have to waste a lot more time because there's a lot more thorough process for checking in and buying and paying for things at a dispensary versus paying for things at a liquor store or at a convenience store. And so, yeah, it's a more regulation, more power for the state at the detriment of the people. And I wish I could say I was shocked.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. But again, it's not. This is not shocking. This should not surprise, excuse me, anyone at all that this is happening. This is, and you know why it keeps happening? Because it works so well. So many people fall for this circus freak show that in turn gives them the ability to keep doing these things. If they can pull on and tug on enough heartstrings of people, and the people fall for it, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about marijuana or we're talking about war or we're talking about some tax or whatever, if enough people fall for it and don't stand up and go, okay, well, we'll make sure you're never elected again if this goes through, they will continue the bad behavior. That's the worst part of this whole thing, is that these people cannot stop themselves. And again, if you're conservative, the last thing, if you were going to govern within the original Republican Party platform, the last thing you would do would be to create more laws and regulations. You would be doing less of those things. But Eben Thampey, I have to give credit to him because he was going around the state fighting, hoping to defeat Amendment 3. And he did come on my show when I had him on one night to discuss this. And this is one of the things he warned me about, that Delta 8 and Delta 10 products would become a target of the state and that they would push to get these things either made illegal or force them to sell only in dispensaries. And that was one of the wishes of the big marijuana interests in the state. They wanted to get rid, again, just like all the time, they'll regulate their competition out of business. And that's what they're doing now. They're regulating. They probably helped write this to get the wording right so that it funnels everything through them. And if in the off chance it kind of cuts the competition out, they're just sitting there clapping and rubbing their grubby little fingers together in anticipation. It's saying, well, if you want any intoxicating beverages that have cannabinoids, you'll have to come to my shop now. So you're making these people really happy. And, any Republican that signs on to this, if they want to be a co-sponsor of this bill, not that they care what I think, because clearly they don't, or they don't care what a lot of us freedom lovers think, but they should know in their heart of hearts. They should be reminded on a daily or weekly basis that you're not a Republican. You're not. You're not conservative. You're not Republican. If you keep voting for regulations or unconstitutional tax credits, you're not a Republican. You're not a conservative. You are a big government politician. But the word Republican or conservative should not be in any sentence, in any paragraph, with your name in it, unless it's saying not a conservative or Republican. That's the only time. But if it's like conservative such and such, no. There should be like air quotes around conservative, like so-called conservative in that sense. But just the word conservative or Republican should not be mentioned anywhere near your name. I'll just leave it at that because
it's just funny because Nick Schroer in the Freedom Caucus would be the first person to call someone a rhino too. Like he at the jump would be the first person to call someone a rhino while also acting like a rhino.
That is indicative of so many people in the Senate and the House in Missouri. There are I don't know how many of these people pretend to be something that they are not. And again, yes, Tom Martz and the Lockensmith Foundation every session has all the voting records and their constitutional score. And all you have to do is look at this spreadsheet and you can see, oh, let's see, this guy was out on the radio or he had ads or he's in social media talking himself up. But here's a spreadsheet and it shows right here, I even highlighted it, that he voted the correct way 40 times out of 165. And I think that should be our new mission this coming legislative session. If I can get Tom to send me 2024 scorecard, and then every time one of these schmucks gets on X and says something, and I can just clip their score and just put it in the post underneath the thing. It's like, that's not a conservative score. If you vote constitutionally 65 times out of 165, I'm sorry, you're not a conservative.
Well, I think we could have a Rhino of the Week contest where Tom Martz could send us over the updated voting record every week. And every week on whatever day on Fridays, we could be like, this guy right here is the Rhino of the Week. He voted. There was X amount of bills that came through, and he voted unconstitutional on this many. And we might have a winner back-to-back weeks or multiple, winners in multiple weeks. So I think that's a great idea. We should definitely start that segment.
So I know that one of Brandon and I's, and I feel like I'm copying a little bit off of them, and maybe I am. Let's just say that I feel like I want to kind of copy them. Because now we wouldn't do it because they do 4 to 5 shows a week. We do 1 a week. But I thought we could start a new little segment in the show, and it just says, you're number one. Now, the people on the radio wouldn't see what we're doing. But we could pick out a really sleazy politician, something they've said or a bill they passed, either federally or in the state. And we could talk about it for 5 minutes and then go, hey, so-and-so, you're number one. And we just flip the bird to the camera and we say they're number one. So we might have to start a segment and we'll just call it, it's this week, you're number one. And then we talk about it and we go, yep, there you go, you're number one. Also, folks, a little update speaking about, because we're talking about Friday. So talking to my boss the last few days, he thinks, I guess if I'm not fully stupid as I think I am, I guess some of these people have a little more faith in me than I do. He's thinking maybe only 6 weeks of training. So the show, I will keep you updated as time goes on, but the show may be moving to Wednesdays. I was thinking February. It may be moving to Wednesday nights. Middle of January, possibly. So keep your eyes and ears open. We will keep you up to date. But when it moves, Brandon and I have already discussed this. We've discussed Wednesday nights, same time, 6:30 in the evening. We will start doing the show on Wednesday evening. So it could be the middle of next month this show moves on the live stream. Now, if you're on the podcast side of things, you'll get it sooner. If you're on MOLibertyRadio.us, it'll still be on Saturday nights and Wednesday afternoons. I told Sam he didn't have to worry about shuffling the whole lineup to realign with when we release the show. But that is maybe coming a little sooner than I thought it was. But that's fine. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we're going to have to do some kind of special segment, especially during the Missouri legislative session. Yeah, if Tom can find a really awful bill, or anybody out there finds a really awful bill, let us know, and we'll make them number one of the week. And it'd be funny to have a trophy with a middle finger, and you just ship it to their office. Then you go in there, one day, and there's 10 of them. Good Lord, how many of these do you win? He was like, I don't know, but I feel pretty special. I don't think you're supposed to feel special, bro. This is supposed to be letting you know how poorly we think of you. You're not supposed to be proud of yourself right now.
It'd be funny if we could have a little trophy made up with a middle finger on it. Yeah, that would be classic.
And just have one winner for the year, the most awful person. You just ship it to them. And you're like, there you go, you're number one.
Oh, yeah. They'll get a big one that's got handles on each side. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
One of those idiots would be like, look what I won. And they're like, that's not a good award, dummy.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of those winners could be the person who pre-filed a Missouri bill to subsidize $100 million for downtown St. Louis renovation projects for unused buildings. So to break that down for you, they're going to take your tax dollars and give it to some big developer so he can develop apartments for people downtown. So my money, your money being sent to developers to develop apartments for someone else downtown St. Louis. As if that project's not going to be massively over. I mean, I just got so much. Your opinion first, because I got a lot to say about this too. But what are your thoughts on it?
Well, we know how government projects are funded. That, they're always stealing other people's money to fund their little pet projects. And then we also now know that they say we're going to do it to this many things. I don't remember how much the federal government wanted to spend on charging stations that fell abysmally short.
Billions.
Same way with broadband. Abysmal failure. They didn't get anywhere close to what they wanted. So even if this passes and they do this, the amount of buildings that get done will be minimal because it's the people's money. So there is no incentive for them to be smart with people's money. So these contractors could make up all kinds of crap. And of course, these city aldermen or county officials are going to give contracts to their buddies who are going to have bloated contracts. So all these promises, of course, are not going to, they're going to fail to meet expectations just
But even
so
if they
badly.
meet expectations, like even if they do the project as designed, it's at a detriment to anyone who doesn't get one of those apartments. You just paid for someone else to build that. Not even the people who get the apartments, the people who make them are the only ones who really benefit. Not to mention the number of times that downtown St. Louis has floated with a universal income program. Basically, they're going to take our money, give it to those people downtown to build apartment buildings, and then they're going to take our money and give it to the people to move in and live there. It's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Even if the plan goes perfect, it's still taking our money and giving it to some rich developer. I'm so against it. Let them make their own investment. Let them reap their own rewards when they do so if people want to move into those buildings, and let the market dictate it. Don't take my money to dictate the market, because then the rent where I'm at is going to be more expensive because you just built I paid money to build a bunch of apartments downtown. It's so stupid.
Not to mention the fact how many people, it's like they want to act like St. Louis and the crime and everything has just gotten so much better. You're going to have to do a lot more than some apartment buildings downtown to get people there, because people are like, I don't move to downtown St. Louis. What? Oh, you'd like me to move into a gang territory. Oh, great. I hope the rent's low because I'm going to have to keep replacing everything that's stolen from me or get mugged or what. So there's so many incentives to not get an apartment. Not to mention they're stealing your money, but then this is a nice area. Like, hey, we noticed the bullet holes all over. Oh, that was from months ago. We just haven't fixed it yet. Don't worry. There hasn't been a gang shooting in like a few days. Ugh.
But then best case scenario, a bunch of people with money move into those apartments, and then everyone cries gentrification. Everyone cries that you've taken over their neighborhood with all of this investment and people who spend money. It's like, what do you want? Do you want us to let it fall apart? Because when we invest money into it and people start coming back to your city, then you cry foul that it's gentrification. So you literally can't win, no matter what you try to do for these people anyway.
Real quick, I have to go back. We have to go back to the topic we were discussing a minute ago. Voodoo Queen's got a good idea for the show too. We could do Rhino Bingo. So I guess you could think of topics for or like laws for different things, like tax. Who has tax credit on their bingo card, and you could dot it up, or who wrote up a new regulation. You're like, that was a Republican, dot it up. So you could think of like, I don't know how many 25?
24 in a free space.
Yeah, so 24 squares of just different things that that rhinos would do, and then we could play Rhino Bingo. I don't know what would happen if somebody calls out bingo. Like, I don't know what we do, but it would be funny.
Send them a free T-shirt. Yeah, if you can prove that you had the bingo card and you won it. It might have to be like a several weeks thing though. Like we might like if we don't cover the whole bingo card in 1 week, it'd be like over 2 or 3 weeks. You check off your bingo card and you take a picture of it, send it to the show, and we'll send you a free T-shirt.
Or just even if it takes halfway through the session and only one it's like, okay, fine. Yeah, we'll take that into heavy consideration. Maybe we'll do Rhino Bingo. Brandon and I just have to put our heads together and think of 24 squares of big government things to put on a card, and if a rhino does it, and then I don't know how I could draw it up on something, and then I could just post a picture, and they could capture it or whatever, and just say, bingo. If you're listening and you hear it, and then you cover your bingo card, and the first person that says bingo gets a free shirt. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, we could totally do that. It'd be pretty cool. Yeah, again, these officials in St. Louis don't want to admit to their shortcomings and the things and the policies that they've created and the environment that they have created is pushing people out of downtown St. Louis and moving to the outlying areas or even moving out of the county. They don't want to look in the mirror and see who the real problem is. So instead, let's steal money from the population of St. Louis and dump it into buildings, into apartment buildings to try to draw these people in. But again, it's going to take a lot more than a nice apartment to get me to move in there. That's all I'm saying.
So another point to like the people of St. Louis, not necessarily the people, but like some of the officials, they can't help themselves because, like with crime in particular, it's unpopular in the city of St. Louis to be tough on crime or pro-police, but you also have high crime rates. And so what do you expect? Like, you're not allowed to be tough on crime. You're not allowed to give harsh sentences. And, crime is a huge problem. And so I don't know how you win that game. Like, you would have to be super unpopular while you were cracking down on crime. And then when the streets were safe, hope the people respected you enough to vote for you again. Because there's no, you can't win you can't win an election in a Democrat stronghold saying you're going to be super tough on crime and that you're going to impose harsher sentences for gang-related crime. It just doesn't work.
It's like playing ping pong with two broken paddles. And they can't figure out why they can't get the ball over the net to the other side.
No, it's like playing ping pong with half the board up, and you wonder why you can't score points. It just Forrest Gump and the ball back to yourself.
They're just swinging and they're not hitting anything. Like, wait, where's the ball? And like, hey, dummy, it went right past you. Again, we threw a fact at you. It was a swing and a miss. We gave you the opportunity to figure out what you're doing wrong. You just, it's like giving, it's like, like when you're a little kid. Go ahead.
Just always to throw more money at it. Like, they literally can't figure out that just literally putting more money in one place does not solve the problem.
Yeah,
go on.
They'll just buy more broken paddles. They're like, well, the last time the handles were broken, maybe it's the handles. And then they order some more and the whole paddle's missing and they're swinging a stick and they still can't hit it. And you're like, bro, buy a normal paddle so I can paddle your butt when you're being childish. Like, I don't do something, but buy actual paddles. You keep buying broken crap, and your buddy that's your best friend for years who's donated to your campaign keeps selling you broken paddles. Stop buying from that dude. Like, clearly there's something going on. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It is funny to watch these people grovel. And again, they say so many dumb things, and they're like, we're really trying, and you're just like, really? Like give me 6 months. Let me open the books. Give me 6 months. That's the thing. They would not want ordinary people with, more than 2 brain cells to rub together to look at the books. People would lose their freaking, like, it says here you spent $13,000 on a new ice machine in this office. Like, yeah. So if the St. Louis County executives don't have ice in their drinks, they just can't seem to get anything done. They're all really crabby. So we bought them an ice maker to calm the room down. Just like, here, buddy, chill out, have some fresh ice. And then some people be like, oh yeah, okay, I can see what. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get angry if I if my ice is dirty, I get angry too. So yeah, go ahead. That's fine. Buy the ice machine.
I'm glad you brought up waste, because there was a story that I probably would have slipped through the cracks if you didn't say something. But there was a report done. I think Joni Ernst from Iowa released a report that, I think she's a U.S. Senator from Iowa. Only 6% of federal employees work a 40-hour work week in the office. And if you get rid of security guards and maintenance, it's less than 1% of all federal employees work a 40-hour work week in the office. That blows my mind. That's crazy. the amount of lazy incompetentness we have at the federal level. Like if Doge doesn't crack down on something along those lines, I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's just, I mean, I'm sure there are some employees who can work from home. Like I'm sure there are some jobs that you can do from home. There's no way over 99% of non-maintenance and security jobs can be done from home effectively for 40 hours a week. There's just no way. It can't be done.
No, it is not. It is not efficient. Like when COVID hit, my wife worked from home for like a year and a half, and the governor finally said, "Get those people back in the building," because things were not being done in an efficient manner. They were getting way behind. So he's like, they got to come back in, and a lot of them got upset. My wife was chomping at the bit to go back in the building because she's like, if everybody's there, they're like, here's my cubicle, there's their cubicle. I don't have to make a phone call. I can just walk to them and go, hey, what's going on with this, and get it solved. But if you're trying to email people because everybody's at home and all these things, she said it was horrible. So she was ready to go back in. There were a lot of employees that were just like, yeah, I can roll out of bed, stay in my pajamas, go downstairs, turn on my computer, and just work from home. Great. Because they let them take monitors home instead of, expecting people to go out and buy 2 monitors. Like, oh, if you want to take a couple monitors home, you can take monitors home to hook up to your computer so, you have all the stuff you need. So they did all those things. Yeah, my wife said it was horrible to try to problem solve when people had horrible internet at home, or, you get internet outages or whatever, and trying to communicate was terrible. So, and this has been going on for, I'm sure, years, probably since COVID. They probably didn't make any of these people come back. And so, yeah, when you're trying to contact an agency because you have a problem, think of government in its normal form, which is horrific, and then multiply it by 10, and that's all these employees working from home.
It takes, like, I know people who effectively worked from home. Like I know people, but it takes a harder like you just have to be very you can't get distracted. Like anybody who gets distracted easily, they're not going to be able to work from home. There's too much to do. There's too much distraction. Like friends of mine, close friends of mine, they had sales jobs where they were working from home part-time, or like not part-time, but they were full-time working at home. They spent a large portion of their time playing video games and just watching TV. And they would make the exact bare minimum amount of calls that they had to make without getting in trouble, and then would do as much messing around as they could, versus when they went to the office, they were making calls as much as possible. I mean, if you're a business owner, do whatever you want. I'm not here to gripe on you, but if my tax dollars are going to all these people sitting at home, watching TV, doing nothing, then it's about time they get their butts back to work.
Yeah, so we've got a contractor at work, and he's coming through. He's spending time there going through and redoing all the lockout, tagout stuff for all the equipment in the building. And he said he was watching something where they're talking about baggage fees. So, he's like, there was 4 of us sitting in the office. He's like, let's say the 4 of us got on a plane, and he goes, your baggage fee would be $15, and hers would be $15, but mine would be $99, and yours would be $99. And there's no rhyme or reason on how they're charging people these baggage fees. Like, it's just random. And they're like, well, we have to make money. And the guy's like, and but I was talking to one of the other, we walked out and we started walking to to talk to somebody about some tools that the builders are using anyway. And I said, it is unfortunate. I was like, but think about how heavily the airline industry is regulated. And I said, that's where that stupidity comes from. It's not like these airlines are just, this isn't a free market for the airline industry. It is stupid amount of regulations that they have, all these fiery hoops that they have to jump through. I'm not excusing the fact that they're just randomly picking who's paying $15 and who's paying $99. Not excusing that. But to sit here and think there won't be some corruption or some shady business practices where they're trying to make a profit because every nickel and dime they get gets just sucked out of their hands, You think they're just going to be like, oh, yeah, we won't do anything and go out of business? You think they're just going to do that? Or you're going to think they're going to make up things to try to keep some cash flow? That's the thing I wish people would get a little better grasp on. It's just like, the CEO of United Healthcare getting gunned down. I'm sorry, that looks exactly like an assassination from the video. I mean, the dude's got a silencer and everything, or I'm sorry, a suppressor. I should use the right term. And you get online and you see all the, oh, that guy deserved it. Oh, I wonder if lead poisoning was one of those, what do they call it? Pre-existing conditions that they don't cover. And you saw all the trash talk and all the trash talk about the CEOs. And it's like, and all you people talk about is you talk crap on the insurance industry. But who wrote a law? Who was the Speaker of the House and said we have to pass it to know what's in it? All this bill governing insurance, medical insurance. And you're going to look at me and say that guy is the only problem. And I'm going to look at you and tell you to put the glass pipe down and stop smoking crack and pay attention. You think that guy caused all this crap? You really think that dude and every CEO is the problem? That government and the Affordable Care Act has nothing to do with the state of health care and insurance in this country right now. You, sir, or ma'am, have been living under a rock. And it really, at first I was like, all right, but that's the comments you saw. And it was like nothing to say, hey, stupid. Have you seen what the government's done to everything, especially health care and health insurance? Come on, get real here.
So I'm not condoning gun violence on civilians like that in any way before I get started. But I will say that I feel like the CEOs and the board members of these insurance companies definitely benefited from the Affordable Care Act, because then they could charge they just could supercharge premiums to everybody, and it was going to be subsidized by the government. Instead of making healthcare cheaper for people who, have less income, they can charge the same amount. And I know they have to cover pre-existing conditions, and I understand that is a burden on the insurance companies, but it gave them the green light to charge exorbitant amount of money to everybody under the guise of these regulations. So it kind of goes to like the board members and CEOs of insurance companies and those healthcare companies. I can't remember the one, but they're all in bed together. I mean, I'm sure it was the Affordable Care Act would not have gone through if the handlers at all these major insurance companies would have been opposed to it. It just wouldn't have. And so, I mean, obviously I don't condone violence on this guy, but there are plenty of reasons for someone to want to go after the CEO of a healthcare company. Oh. I mean, if you had a family member who died, if their treatment was delayed or denied and they died from something that could have been treated if they would have been improved through their health insurance, then you could see grievances for many different reasons. I heard this guy was also splitting up from his wife, and that there was he's just I heard again, I don't know if any of this is true, just reading stuff on X, I heard that he's not a great guy to begin with. Yeah. Again, doesn't justify shooting him, but another thing about this, the assassin too. Most assassination attempts, because I've seen several other assassination attempts in New York, where assassins assassinate people in New York. They go right up to the back of the head and pull the trigger right there, and then they usually have like a getaway vehicle waiting on the other side of the street for him. And it's like this guy, his moves just seemed off, because it took him 4 shots or 3 shots, or I don't know how many times he shot, but it wasn't just the one shot assassination. And then he also took a city bike on this escape route. And they were able to someone was able to track where it went, or believes he was able to track where this guy went. And they have pictures of him at like either a hotel or somewhere. He's got his picture taken. So supposedly it's the guy. And so that's just very off for an assassin to be that exposed, that rough of a getaway, that not clean of an actual kill on the assassination. I don't know, just seems weird. But anyway, Yeah, I get your point, though. Your point is right, is that the government gives the green light for these companies to do some of their dirty work in the first place and stifles small business from competing with these giant insurance companies, and regulation is going to kill small business in lots of ways. So yeah, you can't just point the finger at the CEO of a company and be like, you're the reason this is the problem. It's the government's got their hand in it, or somebody would have competed with that guy and done something different.
And that, that's the thing too. I brought this up to people who were all about the Affordable Care Act seems great. It's like these insurance companies agree. Okay, and it's like, okay, maybe. I'm not saying either way right now. It's like, you do understand Obama admitted that the insurance companies got to come in and help write that legislation. So if the insurance companies are so greedy and so awful, and the Affordable Care Act is supposed to save us all, then why did he let those people come in and help write the legislation? They were in the building crafting the legislation. You look at a lot of states, you had multiple insurance companies. Missouri, I think, has one left. Some states have one or two companies left. Again, all they had to do was write a bill that said you can buy insurance across state lines. It would have created so much competition that costs would have gone down, because you're more of a free market system. They did the opposite. They cut the competition out. The government, in a public-private partnership with insurance companies, helped drive their competition out of the market. Where what happens? It's an automatic function in a market system, especially a crony capitalist system. You eliminate competition and prices automatically rise. There is no lowering. And if the government's like, well, we're going to price fix, all that happens is more companies go out of business. And the only people who are left are the biggest ones. And so all these loony lefties and all these people who have no inkling on what economics is will want the government to step in on things like this. And what does the government do in crony capitalism? They actually create monopolies. The same institution who has senators and representatives crying about certain businesses having a monopoly on some industry, this same institution, through its legislative processes, will cause monopolies. They will create monopolies for those who give the most to their campaign funds. So people really got to pick up what the government is putting down, which isn't good. It's a lot of bull hockey, but you still got to pick it up, give it a sniff, and go, up, smells like you know what, and stop listening to this stupid drivel coming out of their mouths trying to convince you that if they don't step in, that someone's going to screw you over. The government screws us over every day. When you can't put your feet on the floor and walk out of your house and go to a store, drive your car somewhere where government hasn't had its hands creating higher costs. You cannot, in this country, do anything. Purchases, going to a job, anything. You can't do anything the government doesn't have its greedy little fingers in it, creating regulatory systems that cause hardships for businesses, raises costs, and makes your life harder. And if people can't get that through their thick heads, things will not improve, ever.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
Crap just, and I feel like it sucks because I feel like I get on here every week and repeat myself. And it sucks that I have to keep repeating myself because it's like, hey, guys, and it's not for the people that generally listen to. I think most people listen to the show have a pretty good grasp of things. But, it's like, it's after a while you just go, okay. You still hear the arguments. People, like, somehow or another, and generally they're good people. I'm not saying these people are awful people and they love big government. But as they're making an argument sometimes, again, the guy was talking about the airline industry. It's like, yes, you're forgetting a big part of the problem, and that is the federal government and its regulatory bodies that cause a lot of these issues. Yes, I'm not, sometimes, and I'm going to say this, and I'm more libertarian, but sometimes even some libertarians, not all of them, some libertarians go so much into free market, and I want the free market, but they kind of, when they're talking about corporations, they act as if there's no greed possible. It's like, oh no, there is. We've seen plenty of greedy corporations and the horrible things that they can do. Now, generally, those corporations are best friends with a lot of politicians, so they kind of get a pass. But we can't act like there's no greed in corporations and somebody like maybe the guy from United Healthcare was a total POS. It's very possible. And we can't take that completely out of the solution, out of the problem. We can't look at that and go, well, we can just eliminate the greed thing. That's gone. But you also can't forget the institutions that are embedded into these different products or services that make everything tougher on the industries. So there's so many variables here, and people tend to get tied up on one side or the other. And it's like, no, a lot of times they're both at fault, because the corporation is going to their best friend in government and buying privileges and helping write regulation to get rid of their competition. You can't just blame it on the corporation, and you also can't just blame it on the politician. Both parties are at fault, and it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, and the only way to guarantee that cycle doesn't continue is you cut off the bridge between the corporation and the government, where it buys the favors. And that way, I mean, you could still have greedy corporations, but you'd have corporation and corporation and corporation competing with them. You're 100% right. It's greedy corporations and dirty politicians working in unison. It's not like it's not one or the other. And no system is going to be perfect. People are flawed. Like, we're never going to have a system where no one ever gets gamed, where crime's never committed. It's about allowing people to make the most free choices they can, and, allowing people to protect themselves and keeping corporations from dirtying up the game.
Yeah. But again, that's the worst part, is that people don't, when you hear people talk, I just wish people would, when they're talking to other people that they know in these situations, that they would lay out everything. And again, it seems to tilt one way or the other. And I'm just like, I think you can have greed on both sides, which is honestly, that is the problem. It's greed on both sides. It's, again, government. And I guess the other problem is, because some people say, you going to your representative or senator and saying, hey, I don't like this. Can we craft some legislation that gives me and everybody else in the state, let's say it's a Missouri thing, more liberty. Now, you are lobbying your representative to do something that protects liberty or gains more liberty. So that is, in fact, kind of a lobbyist. Now, and you're lobbying, and there's no money involved. You're just lobbying your representative or senator to do the right thing. When you use the word lobbying, you automatically think of some dude holding a big bag with a dollar sign on it and walking into a politician's office, dropping it on the desk and go like, I need my competition to vanish. And you're like, say less, my friend. But the thing is, okay, let me ask you this, Brandon. Because government, even though even some of the founders said, have been quoted as saying government is a necessary evil. So some people say corporations lobbying the government to try to maybe keep some regulations at bay is free speech. Oh, okay. But this is like a chicken or the egg thing. What came first? Did government corruption come first, and then the corporations like, we got to figure this out. We got to buy favor from our politicians? Or did corporations say, if we buy favor from politicians, then we can create these things that eliminates competition? I don't know, because I don't know the history of lobbying. But it is a fair question to ask. Which came first, greedy government or greedy corporations buying favors? So I would think that because humankind being the way it is, I would say that when people get power, especially in government, that it's just power draws some of the worst people, and like, how do I get more power? How do I get more power? And how do I keep this power? So I feel like maybe greedy government or tyrannical government came first, and then the corporations figured out if we can get in there and buy political favors, then that moves us to the top of the heap, and other people get screwed. I don't know.
The only reason I would disagree with that is, you could be right, but I think it would be greedy people first, because more power than power is money. I mean, money is power just as much as power is power in a lot of ways. So I feel like what you would more likely see is someone with money than having power to go buy a politician to go do his dirty work for him to crush out his competition. It seems like there'd be more incentive for the business to do it first, just in theory. But either way, it's all about, like you were saying, it's all about just them working together to do, to stifle competition, to give themselves favors. And with lobbying, with corporate lobbying, I don't have a problem with it if it's public information. Like, if I know that my politician is taking a bunch of dirty money and everyone wants to remain ignorant to that fact, because it is. A lot of it, like on the FEC data is public. Like, if you want to know how much dirty money your politician is making, you can go find it. And if you want to continue to vote for that dirty politician despite them taking all of that corporate money, I mean, that's on you. Like, that's on the voters. That's on the people who didn't. I mean, obviously it's wrong. I'm not saying it's not right, but if you're, like you said, you're going to stop people from doing actual lobbying if like people who lobby for freedom aren't going to be able to lobby for freedom, which is going to be an infringement on freedom of speech. And so, again, I think it's on the general population to just pay more attention. Like, if the government made it illegal to look up FEC data, like if they shadowed all FEC data where you couldn't see who was donating to what campaigns, then there's an argument to be more against that, because your public official is you're supposed to know at least who's buying and paying for them, even if you don't, even if you think that corporate lobbying is corruption on its face, you should at least have that information known to you. And in my opinion, you shouldn't vote for that person. You should know that information and have the choice to not vote for them. The amazing fact is how many of them take all of that corporate lobbying money and continue to find themselves back in office.
Yeah, it is on the people. It is on the people to figure out who is screwing them over, who is lying to them, which is generally almost all of them. And again, stop voting for people because they have a certain letter behind their name. Stop voting for people who only pay homage to the Constitution but refuse to follow it. Because honestly, that's how we got here. We got here, regardless of government's involved in some way. If it's a transaction between a corporation and a government to gain favor, whatever, the people in power in government are the first to blame because they strayed from the constitutional the confines of the Constitution. So they have to be kind of in order of blame. The government officials, the politicians have to be the first. But then you say that, and then it makes you think, yes, but then you have a lot of people who vote for politicians who stray from the Constitution. So also the people have to be more knowledgeable on the Constitution to know the people that use the supremacy clause or the general welfare clause, who misquote it for their own twisted agendas. You have to recognize when they're lying and say that's not what the general welfare clause was for. You don't know what you're talking about. Out you go. So between the people and the politicians, really, you have to cast fault at the feet of many. It's super easy. I know it is because I do it all the time. It's super easy to blame a politician for what ails you. And yes, they deserve a lot of fault. But there's a lot of fault to also be blamed or laid at the feet of people who don't have any understanding of the document that, again, is there to protect your natural rights and keep and it tells the government this is what you protect. These are your few powers. Everything else goes to the states. That's it. And the people, because of handouts and a lot of false promises, fell into this pit trap. They've dug themselves a nice big, they've dug everyone a nice big hole, and some of us just want to climb out of it and see daylight again. That's all we want, and we want to be left alone. And there's a lot of other people and a lot of other politicians who are making that nigh impossible to do.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and pull up the Ketanji Brown Jackson clip, and I'll set it up?
Yeah, you go ahead and set up. I've got.
Okay. So Tennessee had a bill that that passed, and the governor signed it, that banned certain treatments for transgender minors. So under the age of 18, they restricted puberty blockers, certain puberty blockers for transgenders, and then surgeries for transgenders. And this has found its way all the way to the Supreme Court. It's been challenged, and they heard it. They heard arguments at the Supreme Court. And Ketanji Brown Jackson, she might be the one this week. She might be number one. But her argument, so she had an argument that we don't have, that I didn't pull up the clip for, but one of her arguments was that banning transgender surgeries was equivalent to banning interracial marriage. Was one of her, euphoric,
arguments.
Yes, her in her infinite wisdom as a Supreme Court justice. That was one of her takes. And then the clip that we have pulled up is her arguing that giving testosterone to young men to help them develop when they're not going through the natural stages of puberty, right? She argues that giving testosterone to a boy is the same as giving testosterone to a girl. That is an actual thing she said. And this is the same woman who, when she was being nominated for the Supreme Court, couldn't tell you what a woman was. And now she seems to have a firm grasp on exactly what a woman is, exactly how the woman's body works, and that testosterone functions the same.
Yeah, let me play this audio here. Let me pull this up.
It operates on the body in the same way. So what's your basis for saying they're not the same?
I don't think it operates on the body in the same way. Take testosterone. If you give a boy with a deficiency testosterone because he has constitutional delayed puberty, that allows him to go through and develop the reproductive organs associated with being a male. If you give it to a girl, it renders the girl infertile. So we have 8 to 12-year-olds being
I'm sorry.
asked.
I thought your reasons for them being different was that you said they were for different purposes. I'd heard you say at the beginning the reason those two are different is because one wants them to transition and the other wants them for some medical purpose.
Well, to go back to my example in the introduction, I don't think anyone would say using morphine to assist suicide is the same treatment as using morphine to manage pain. It's the same drug, just like it's the same drug here, but they're being used for fundamentally different purposes. They have different effects on the body. And once you take out and you recognize medical reality, then there is no argument that our law differentiates between treatments for males and females.
Can I ask you about one?
Whoa, that was too loud. Sorry about that. Just pulled up another video and it's kapow right in the kisser. Yeah, this Ketanji Brown she's special. I mean, can't we just, I don't know. I guess it's too much to ask anymore. Maybe for Christmas we'll send her a biology book. We'll just, we'll
like
send
an
her.
8th grade biology
Yeah.
book too, not even like a high school one
Yeah.
with like, and just an 8th grade biology. Like,
start it
men
from-
have testosterone. This is what testosterone does. Women have more estrogen. This is what that does to their body.
And yeah, just like beginner stuff. Like, we'll start from the beginning so there's no confusion on what is what, who's got what organs and what. Well, I mean, so she can't get them screwed up. And then if she still can't get it right, we'll send an actual, like, someone who's actually smart into her office and with 2 posters with the little pointer and go, that's a dude, that's a chick. See the difference? Now you go in to the bathroom, disrobe, because I don't want to see that, and then you take these posters with you, and you look. Oh yeah, I look like this one. I must be a female. And you're like, yeah, there you go. See, you nailed it. Now stop being stupid. Okay, proceed. Go back to your bench, lady, and be constitutional if you can.
Well, she probably, if she would have went during this week, she would have been very confused which bathroom to go into.
Oh yeah,
there was a bunch of dudes that looked like chicks mobbing the Capitol Hill bathroom. So she would have been all messed up seeing all of those women going into the women's bathroom. I wouldn't have known which one to go into either. I'd have been like, wait, the sign says for guys, but I don't know what's going on here.
I'm just going to go out and pee on the bush. That seems safer than being in these
trying to
bathrooms.
figure out which bathroom you're supposed to go into on Capitol Hill right now. Holy cow.
Yeah, it is it is astounding. It almost never ceases to amaze me how this has crept its way into the Capitol building, and we have significant problems that our government and its policies have created around the world, and then we have a bunch of trans people showing up and having a bathroom brawl. I don't know. Like, hey, we can use any bathroom we want. Like, yeah, over there, but you can't in here. Clearly says you're either a sitter or a pointer. If you're a dog, you're either a setter or a pointer. So pick one and do it. Go into the right bathroom. I don't know, dude. It bothers me to no end that all the problems that we have, and this is the thing that people grab onto and battle over. It's like, look at our foreign policy. Everything that is way dangerous if it gets out of hand to the world, and you're worried about what bathroom someone's going to be using. Holy smokes.
Well, going back to the Ketanji Brown Jackson thing, the worst part is that she is representative of that way of thinking. It's not like she's a lone crazy wolf and everyone is being like, wow, did you hear what that crazy lady on Capitol Hill or in the Supreme Court said? She said that giving a testosterone to a girl is the same as giving testosterone to a boy. That was her argument. Wow, how crazy. No, there's like half the country, all of academia, all of, the major news, all of the major, media outlets, all of the corporate-owned media outlets, like more than half of them support her in that argument. It's just, what is happening? Like in 2012, the argument was like in 2012, they were putting up gay marriage. It was like gay marriage was the fight. And I understood that fight. I did. I was like, oh yeah, 2 guys should be able to get married. 2 girls should be able to get married. I understand that argument. I don't it's just gone so far off base. Like this corporate leftist agenda. It's not even fringe. It's not radical anymore. It is the Democrat agenda. Like she was nominated by Joe Biden, confirmed by the Senate. Like this is not one crazy person with one crazy opinion in the middle of New York City. This is a Supreme Court justice making these arguments in the Supreme Court and with the support of half of the country. It's unbelievable the amount of damage that our news media and academia has done to our country.
And they really are the media, because they are so beholden to government and the politicians and everything else. they go right along and they parrot whatever they're told. So like when Dave Smith was where's he at? Patrick Bet-David's podcast one time. He was talking about he's like, before I think it was like 2012, you didn't really hear anything about trans issues, the homophobia, all these things. And then there was an election coming, and then the establishment started saying these things. And then immediately the media picked it up and just flooded the airwaves with transphobia and homophobia and all these things. So the establishment established these talking points and then used their best friends in the media to constantly get it. And it's just saturated society to a point where now it's a normal thing to talk about. It's normal to hear someone be called a transphobe or a xenophobe or a homophobe. And it's the new showstopper. If somebody's saying something, it can have nothing to do with homophobia or transphobe. But if somebody is up there making logical arguments about being against something, the first thing the opposition does is throw out the names, the official bad names from the media and politicians, so to try to get one half of the population to automatically shut their ears off to anything else logical this guy says because he's a transphobe. And that's all it's done. It shut down civil discussion and debate in this country because people, when they're backed into a corner and can't back up their side of the argument with facts, go strictly to name calling, and that's when you know you're right over the target, and it's infuriating.
Yeah, the most egregious example of what you just described was when they tried in 2014. They started a campaign to convince America that it was racist, and it worked. Half of the country believed. Starting in 2014, that's when the Michael Brown hands up, don't shoot started. And then it progressed and boiled over in 2020. And it is the riots and all of the businesses that got destroyed in 2020 and all of the riots that happened and all the people that got hurt is the corporate media is very much at fault. A lot of the blame for a lot of the violence and a lot of the destruction is at the feet of the corporate media for pushing this agenda, this narrative that America and the police in America are racist. And there are bad cops. Trust me, in libertarian circles, we have a lot to say about the monopoly of force that the government has. But to say that it is discriminating based on race, especially when you just look at the numbers, when you look at the statistics of interactions versus unarmed deaths for that police officers commit on unarmed civilians, it's not proportional by race. It's proportional by crime areas. But I think it was like only 9 people in one given year were unarmed and killed by police. And that doesn't mean they weren't going crazy and trying to attack the police officer or harm someone else. It just means they didn't have a weapon on them while they were trying to do it. And it was like 9 out of millions and millions and millions of police interactions. And because the corporate narrative needed a media to make Republicans look bad, they just ran with this like, America's racist, Republicans are racist, and if you think Donald Trump's a good guy, you are also a racist. And it's just, and they started it. They did it. And exactly like you were saying, they had this agenda. They convinced everyone that America was this way, and they created a narrative and did so much damage to our country with it.
Yeah, it is. And if people would pay attention, as time goes on, we're going to see other things injected into society by media and by government. And if you're smart, you'll sit back and watch this phenomenon take over. And it'll be in political discussions everywhere. They will make it the new hot topic, the new really hot issue that needs to be tackled by the government. The establishment. The government is always going to find new things, new issues that are discriminatory against one part of the population to make themselves seem relevant. And we've got to battle this. We've got to create legislation to stop this. And then they'll get a certain sector of the population just flooding them with applause. Oh, yes, please save us from this mean group of people over here because they're hurting my feelings because I can't use logic or critical thinking skills. So government is always going to create a new boogeyman that to fight, and they have to lay it out in such a way that captures the attention of the American people, that the people will get behind this whatever madness it is and give more of their liberty away to these institutions to fight something that probably has never affected you in your whole life and probably never will. The only thing that government intrusion does that affects everyone is the erosion of your natural rights. That's it. They don't do anything that you're like, you walk out the door one day and you're like, holy crap, I think I'm actually more free than I was yesterday. No, you don't do that. You open a bill and see a new tax and you're like, oh, they freaking did it again. And then the media covered it up for them. So it's just, again, we are still one of the free, we get on here every week and we talk about this. We are still one of the freest nations in the world. We still are. But how much longer can we say that? How much longer can I utter that phrase before I'm lying to you and myself and everybody else? How much longer can I say that if people are so easily hypnotized by propaganda that they can't see what's coming, they can't see who's coming, what the agenda is, what the actual agenda is, not what they're telling you, and what the outcome is of their legislation, not the intent. They always make the intent sound so good, and it is almost an automatic. The intent and the outcome are going to be two different things. You're going to lose your natural rights. There's going to be a small sector of the population that the government takes underneath its dark black wing, and when they're done, they'll be tossed aside like every other minority group that they've been done with, or try to get them in on the government plantation, hooked on the government dole, or hooked to that agenda, and then but at some point those pawns and chess will be thrown off the board, and they'll find a new group to bring in and do the same thing. And as long, and it's a cycle. We've seen this for over a century. It's not hard to see. The thing is if the people don't wake up and understand that they do the same thing over and over again because it works, they'll keep doing the same thing over and over again because it works. It's really that simple.
Well, there is a glimmer of hope here. I've got good news to bring, and I'm sure you heard it. Kash Patel for FBI director. That is good news. Talk about waking up in the morning, seeing that, and going, you know what? I do feel a little more free. I thought about carrying my gun around work that day, just to be like, you're not getting it, baby. Not this time. Yeah, dude, pretty excited about that. I've seen him talk a whole bunch about, videos of him shooting ARs and all kinds of weapons, and then videos of him saying that what's in it is mind-blowing, but he still wants to release it. Like, I'm excited. He's going to be one of these picks, just like a lot of Trump's other picks, where every Democrat is going to be opposed to it. So it's only going to take a handful of rhinos who are in bed with the CIA and the deep state and don't want these kinds of things released. It's only going to take a handful of them to block these confirmations of these very important picks that Trump is making. So I'm not ultra optimistic that he's even going to be the FBI director, but I will say that it's the fact that Trump picked him means that our country is heading in the right direction as far as for the Second Amendment, at least. And hopefully with him being FBI director, we're going to get to find out, like, he's been talking about how he's going to release all of the information on January 6th and all of the different, like, ways the FBI has been involved in, like, all of the schemes and stuff. So I'm super excited about that nomination.
Yeah. You know what sucks though, Brandon, is I wouldn't see it being fixing the FBI that much, but it would suck because we just designed that Federal Bureau of Entrapment t-shirt, and I mean, you know what? I guess it wouldn't be such a bad thing if I had to, if somehow, again, I don't expect this to happen. Let's just say in a much better world than we normally would look at as far as the FBI. Let's say Kash Patel went and just ruined things for them. I would be more than happy to say I have to actually pull that T-shirt off the market because that no longer applies. They're not going around and trapping people. I have to pull that shirt. I would actually be okay with that. I'd be like, okay, yeah, I designed it, and now Kash Patel comes in and he just pees all in their cornflakes. And what's funny is, after Trump said he wanted to put Robert Kennedy as the head of HHS, I guess they had like FDA employees just quitting like days later. Now, if Kash Patel, if that causes some people in the FBI like, I'm quitting, I can't stand working with this guy. He's too, he wants to protect the Fourth Amendment and all. That'd be cool if you get some. Again, you're never going to flush all the cockroaches out of the dark. It's just they're so entrenched. But if you can get some of them to leave, that's a nice little uptick towards a little more liberty. Even if it's just a fraction of a little point that you get some more liberty because you got some of the cockroaches to leave. And you can actually enjoy your meal in peace without one of them crawling across your plate. I mean, I'll take that as a win. Like, if I can go in and eat and not see a cockroach, I'm like, well, somebody's doing something. They've cleaned up a little bit. I feel safer. I'm not going to get E. coli now. So, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, if it causes some of the cockroaches to go to another building and invest it somewhere, like they all go to California and just ruin that state, okay, that's cool. Yeah, go do that. Go. Maybe we should have like a... You know how if you work for a company and they move you to a different place and they're like, oh, here's some money to help you with your move because, we want you to. Maybe we'll just do that. We'll give them money and you say, hey, can you send all the crappy FBI people to California and just let them run that state? And then sooner or later, California you'll just turn on the news one day and somehow they screwed it up so bad that the land actually wanted to get away from them, so California splits off and starts floating away from the U.S. Like, all the sane people be like, how do we do that with, Illinois? How do we get Illinois to disappear off the map now? How do we do that?
I tell you what, Canada just announced that they're banning, 230 different types of guns, and they're going to send them all to Ukraine, and, so the FBI agents who want to leave, there's work. You could go up and start taking Canadian guns. I'm sure Trudeau would hire you on the spot. They love big government and infringements on natural rights up there. So yeah, let's send all of our FBI agents who want to keep infringing on our rights up to Canada and let them take all the Canadian guns.
How do I become can I split my citizenship between the U.S. and Ukraine so I can just get some of the guns and then bring them to my house? Like, I'm Ukrainian, send some to me. I'll be going over there soon to fight. And they're like, all right, here's some rifles and handguns. And like, psych. And then I just renounce my Ukrainian citizenship and be like, come take them. You're in the wrong country, jackass. Maybe we should do that. Everybody starts saying you're Ukrainian. Maybe they'll just ship you the guns and you'll be like, I'm not Ukrainian anymore. Psych.
Well, maybe we'll get some of our tax dollars back if we do that too. The hundreds of billions of dollars we sent to Ukraine, maybe we could start getting some of that money back if we start claiming we're Ukrainian too.
Heck
I
yeah,
think
man.
you're onto something.
I could be like, I'm training. I'm just not fully trained to go fight yet, but I'm working on it. And you're just going out buying ammo and shooting. Like, are you ready yet? Like, no, my aim still sucks. Give me another year or so. And then somehow they work out a peace agreement and you're like, well, guess I don't have to serve anymore. I still got the guns, but just not the responsibility. That's awesome. I'm down with that for sure.
Speaking of Ukraine, did you hear that Mike Johnson won't send any more money over to Ukraine because Biden requested more Ukraine money? And the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said he's not going to do anything like that until Trump takes office.
I'm fine with that.
That's good news.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think, I hate Mike Johnson. I could go on for 10, 15 minutes right now about how much I hate Mike Johnson, but I'll say, credit where credit's due when you make a good move. I mean, I do hate doing that, though. I hate giving credit where credit's due when you're just a total dirtbag. Like when I have to give you credit, but you're like, I'm going to still throw in there that I hate you and that you're a dirtbag. But,
I wonder if they'll just reroute that to Israel, though. That's the one concern.
Actually, I think right now they're going to reroute it to Al-Qaeda and give it to the Al-Qaeda affiliates that are fighting in Syria right now. We've done that before.
Yeah, we've done it
Wouldn't
before.
be the first time. There was a report that like U.S. officials were shocked that this rebel group took Aleppo and Hama. And I'm just like, no, you're not. We have satellite imagery showing like all of these different groups converging and building these militias for weeks. We weren't shocked by this. I would be shocked if we weren't donating to that cause. I mean, I read somewhere, I couldn't find the article, but I read somewhere that like U.S. officials were backing this rebel group. Like maybe not necessarily like officially, not with funding or money, but like had the support of the Americans. Like the moral, like the U.S. officials are rooting for the rebels in Syria. And I will remind, the last time the Americans gave money to Syrian rebels, moderate Syrian rebels, they turned into ISIS and went back into Iraq and overtook half the country. So if that's the game you want to play, great. Now, the weird part about this particular round of rebels is that they're heavily, heavily funded by Turkey. And Turkey has a lot of issues on its border with Syria because of the Kurds in the northeast. And so a lot of they like building coalitions to fight off the Kurds. And if this coalitions also happen to be fighting the Syrian government, I just don't think that's something that the Turkish government and Erdogan is necessarily worried about. But I just think it's fascinating how they want to sow this, like how the American diplomats are cheering on Al-Qaeda affiliates overthrowing a secular government. And I will just as one more quick reminder, back whenever the Syrian government was taking their land back from the rebels the first time, when they were defeating ISIS caliphates, there were Christian villages celebrating Christmas, like thanking the government because their homes and neighborhoods had been taken over by Muslim extremists and they couldn't celebrate Christian holidays in Syria because of ISIS. And then when the Syrian government took those lands back over, they celebrated. So that's kind of a similar situation of what you're going to see. These people are al-Nusra affiliates, like Al-Qaeda linked terrorist organizations. I'm pretty sure one of the main organizations, the HTS or HST, is one of the main organizations funding one of the main rebel groups. They're actually on the terrorist list. Like they are actually a confirmed terrorist group. And the fact that Americans would be cheering them on as they're marching through a secular government's territory is mind-boggling. But
yeah, I wish I could understand what our government has, why they're so against Bashar al-Assad. And again, when you're talking about the Christians celebrating that these terrorist organizations were pushed back, that Bashar al-Assad and his government retook that territory, and they were shown cheering on the streets. Now, the media tried to make it sound like that was not Christians. That was the rebels the people were cheering the rebels, not Bashar al-Assad kicking them out. They framed it as these people were cheering on the moderate rebels that were fighting. And thanks to Ben Swan, like that clip I played a couple weeks ago, he played a clip. He's like, that is not people cheering on the so-called moderate rebels. They were cheering. It was the Christians cheering for Bashar al-Assad for pushing al-Qaeda back out of there so they could live their religion. But our media tried to frame that as the moderate rebels are winning, and look at the people cheering on for the moderate rebels. And thanks to people like Ben Swan, he's like, au contraire, mon frere, that is not what is going on. And the same thing. But Assad's gassing his own people, and Ben Swann gets on, he goes, no, he's not. So out of all the people on, and again, he was in Cincinnati. He was still in that network in Cincinnati at the time, I believe. He was the only one I heard on a network TV show saying, that is not what's happening. Now, there might have been some others that I didn't hear, but he was big enough that he was putting his stuff on YouTube and you could find it. And he's like, that's not what that is. You go on. I'll see if I can pull that audio up.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that they hate Bashar al-Assad is because he won't curtail to the rules-based order. He is not friendly with the Israeli government because he I'm not exactly 100% sure the reason, but part of it might be because they took the Golan Heights from Syria. That would be one big reason. And also because Israel from the jump has just not been friendly with Syria. And Syria is also friendly with the Russians because I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a long strategic play that involved overthrowing the government of Syria. And Russia needs Syria for its access to the sea in certain areas. And like, there's a strategic reason that Russia is friends with Syria. And also Syria is friends with Iran. Like, they're kind of this loose coalition of basically just fighting American imperialism in the Middle East. And because they refuse to bow down, because Bashar al-Assad refuses to bow down to the rules-based order, they just try to overthrow him every chance they get. And funny enough about the rules-based order, one of the rules-based order countries that America likes to promote in its you know, when it's in its global domination exploration, they love to tote South Korea as like a big victory for like our global domination. Like, well, look what happens with South Korea. South Korea's president just enacted martial law for basically because he was embattled in a couple of scandals and was afraid that he was going to be impeached. So he tried to enact martial law, which banned the General Assembly from convening and banned and basically forced all of the media to bow down to the government and say whatever the government was telling them on TV. There were actually people with guns at news studios forcing newscasters to read off scripts that the South Korean president was basically telling them to publish the news that he was saying. And so, yeah, another excellent example of, you know, America's global domination is that we install a guy who enacts martial law because he's going to be impeached in South Korea. I'm glad we spend billions of dollars propping up his government.
Yeah, it is. I've got this other video that talks about John McCain meeting Syrian rebels in Syria to discuss funding them, but I still haven't found the one. I know he talks about, he had a video about him talking about supposedly Assad, you know, gassing his own people, and
you know what's
I'm still
weird?
looking for it. So
John McCain also met with Ukrainian rebels in Ukraine right before the maiden coup. He's just got his hands all over the place. I think I want to say John McCain, I could be wrong about this, it could be somebody else, but I'm pretty sure John McCain was pictured with a bunch of Taliban members back whenever they were the Mujahideen fighting Russia in Afghanistan. And I think he was, I think he's got a picture with a bunch of them as like, oh, look at my buddies. So he's got pictures with the Taliban, picture with the Syrian rebels, picture with the Ukrainian rebels. Big lover of rebels that John McCain was.
This might be it. Let me see. Again, I don't know. Let me pull this audio up. This might be the one of him talking about this. Give me just a second.
Another devastating report from the Middle East. Some 40 children hit by a gas attack in Syria, with Assad's regime being blamed. President Trump tweets that Assad is an animal, but that Russia and Iran are responsible for backing him, and he says there's, quote, a big price to pay. There are major problems with what is being played out in the Middle East that other media are simply going to ignore, but we won't. Let's give it a reality check.
Reality Check with Ben Swann, powered by Dash Digital Cash.
Well, it is a difficult issue to take on, largely because emotions around this issue are so high. But over the weekend, reports of another chemical attack in Syria, this one in the city of Douma. Video released on ABC, CNN, Al Jazeera, and so many other networks shows the horrific sight of small children who have been gassed. According to the Associated Press, suspected poison gas was used to attack the last remaining foothold of the Syrian opposition in the eastern suburbs of Damascus, killing at least 40 people, including families found in their homes and shelters. Now, these reports come from rescue groups and anti-government forces inside Syria. Well, Sunday, President Trump responded with a series of tweets. Take a look. Quote, "Many dead, including women and children, in mindless chemical attack in Syria. Area of atrocity is in lockdown and encircled by Syrian army, making it completely inaccessible to outside world. President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing Animal Assad. Big price to pay. Open area immediately for medical help and verification. Another humanitarian disaster for no reason whatsoever. Sick." Well, President Trump went even further to threaten even more action against Assad, tweeting this, quote, "If President Obama had crossed his stated red line in the sand, the Syrian disaster would have ended long ago. Animal Assad would have been history." Well, it was nearly 1 year ago to the day when reports of another Syrian gas attack prompted the U.S. military to conduct airstrikes against a Syrian airbase. But as I reported only a few weeks ago, the U.S. Secretary of Defense now admits there was actually no evidence in that case, or in any case, that the Syrian government was the one that used sarin gas. And yet, that reason was the reason the U.S. gave for the most recent airstrike. Watch this. According to Defense Secretary James Mattis, there is no evidence that the Syrian government has used sarin gas on its own people. Here is exactly what Secretary Mattis told reporters at the Pentagon. Quote, "We have reports from the battlefield from people who claim it's been used." Mattis told reporters at the Pentagon, "We do not have evidence of it. We are looking for evidence of it, since clearly we are dealing with the Assad regime that has used denial and deceit to hide their outlaw actions." Well, Mattis insists that he wasn't refuting the claims, but in a sense, he really did. So with no evidence, the U.S. previously conducted an airstrike against a Syrian air base. And now President Trump is saying he's going to go even further. And the usual war cheerleaders, Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham, they are pushing the president to do so. Watch.
We have the capability to destroy his Air Force, to ground his air fleet, and we should use that capability. Their air bases are fixed places on Earth. We have the capability to shut them down, and we should make him pay a heavy price by destroying his air capability.
Now, for his part, Senator McCain released a statement that attempted to blame President Trump for Sunday's attack, saying this, quote, "President Trump last week signaled to the world that the United States would prematurely withdraw from Syria. Bashar Assad and his Russian and Iranian backers have heard him, and emboldened by American inaction, Assad has reportedly launched another chemical attack against innocent men, women, and children, this time in Douma." Well, all of this as the media continues to discount the idea that jihadists, including those so-called U.S.-backed Syrian rebels, have used chemical weapons in the past. Even though UN investigator Carla Del Ponte, she was unable to fulfill her UN joint investigative mandate in Syria and withdrew in protest over the United States refusing to fully investigate allegations of chemical weapon use by rebels who were actually jihadis, allied with the American effort to oust President Assad. According to the Times of London, Carla Del Ponte, head of the independent UN commission investigating reports of chemical weapons use in Syria, told a Swiss-Italian television station that UN investigators gleaned testimony from victims of Syria's civil war and medical staff, which indicated that rebel forces use sarin gas, a deadly nerve agent. Quote, "Our investigators have been in neighboring countries interviewing victims, doctors, and field hospitals. And according to their report of last week, which I have seen, there are strong, concrete suspicions, but not yet incontrovertible proof of the use of sarin gas from the way the victims were treated." De Ponte said in an interview, it was translated by Reuters, quote, "This was use on the part of the opposition, the rebels, not by the government authorities," she added. So what you need to know, that goes back to what Senator John McCain said about Syria doing this because the U.S. might withdraw, but the opposite of that statement is likely true. Now consider this. A year ago, with no evidence, President Trump ordered the largest strike so far against Syria over claims of chemical weapon use, right? So if now the president signaled he would withdraw from Syria, why would the Syrian government, before the withdrawal happens, use chemical weapons on its own people. Strategically, that makes no sense at all, unless there's a bigger strategy at play here. That involves the US, Israel, Russia, and Iran. But believe this, what's being sold in the media as to what is happening in Syria is not what it seems. Would Israel and the US attack Syria and Iran because of a chemical attack that's not been proven to be from the Syrian government? Remember, Israel recently admitted that it was behind the 2007 bombing of Syria's nuclear reactor. And just 2 weeks ago, a joint military exercise between Israel and the US played out a scenario of an Iranian attack on Israel. Meanwhile, the media shows you pictures of harmed children and avoids the bigger question, which is this. Is the US potentially being pulled into an Iran-Israel war? That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that right now on social media.
So there you go. Ben Swann laying that out quite nicely. Once again.
How old was that?
That was from around. Oh man, let me see if I can pull it back up. 6 years ago, so 2018.
It's just funny how it's 6 years later and we're still being pulled into a war between Iran and Israel. And this time it seems like Israel has way more support from the the elected American officials. So that's, I mean, but yeah, dude, that's the whole. I've been saying that I said that from the jump. Why would Syria use chemical weapons when they're winning? And it was the only red line the United States had. It makes no sense because they even talk. Lindsey Graham's like, well, they have a massive air force and we can take out their air capabilities. They would just bomb the place and they wouldn't have to use chemical weapons. They could just use airstrikes. If they were going to decimate an entire area like Israel does, they could just use airstrikes to do it. They don't have to use chemical weapons to do it. And so it's, oh man. And it's happening again right now. Like there are rebel forces marching towards Damascus trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And those rebel forces are Islamists. They are Islamic jihadists. They are actual terrorists. So the cycle continues.
Yeah, and of course the media is going to try to, they want to pull at the heartstrings, and I'm sure Israel wants to attack Syria. Israel wants to attack everybody. It seems like anywhere close to them, they want to blow them up. So Israel, I mean, I haven't got to read much into it, but clearly Israel pushed, helped foment the war in Iraq over oil and things like that. So Israel manipulates our government into attacking an awful lot of countries, or getting into, whether they're proxy wars or whatever, but helping with funding and weapons to an awful lot of and blowing up an awful lot of other countries where we have no fault being. And Netanyahu is at the forefront of these lies and propaganda and misinformation and disinformation. I mean, the guy, as much as we don't trust the ICC, but Netanyahu's being considered a war criminal. And I would say that in this instance, they are correct. Netanyahu is a freaking war criminal. There's no question about it.
The UN, Amnesty International, and the ICC have all stated that it was an attempt to wipe out the people who lived in Gaza. That Israel's offensive was an attempt to rid to force all of the Palestinians out of Gaza. It's like all the three major international branches have determined that. And none of them have a real reason to say that. Like the International Criminal Court knows that if it goes against Israel, that they're just going to be hounded by the United States. Like the United Nations knows that when it releases a report, it's going to receive major backlash from like the Western powers. So there's no real reason for them to do this other than the fact that it's the truth. Like, other than the fact that Israel's actually committing these atrocities, they have no reason to make these arguments if they weren't doing that.
Yeah, it's again, as we've stated many times on this broadcast, and I know a few, like Scott Horton has talked about this at length, that Netanyahu and some others in Israel, the IDF or whatever, in their different roles in Israel, have admitted, it's been published in Israeli newspapers, that they claim that they control the height of the flame, which means they control not so much the actions, but they can turn up the heat and get Hamas to retaliate. And then that creates the October 7th thing last year. They can create these scenarios to gain sympathy, especially from the United States, get the money, get the weapons to go in and just indiscriminately blow people up. And they're like, well, but they are in control. This is not. Now, I'm not saying they control all the Hamas leadership, but they can certainly do things to infuriate them and to cause tensions to heighten and get Hamas to attack them, and then they have an excuse to go in there and tear up Jake. If the situation was handled differently, I'm not saying Hamas would never attack Israel. I don't think you'd see what we had in October last year. They just, it's one of those things where they just poke the bear and do things to cause this scenario. Again, all they need, it's not just our government. There are an awful lot of people living in this country, whether they're media, whether it's people in the churches, whatever, who will fully back and support Israel doing what they're doing. We can't, and that's another problem. It's easy to blame our government. They deserve a lot of blame. But there are way too many people in this country, because it's Israel and because they look at the Bible and say, well, God says you're supposed to support Israel. Yeah, does it say the government of Israel or the people of Israel? Do you think that Christianity is a religion of war? Because it's really not. So get that out of your head. Dump that garbage out of your head right now and start looking at this from a humanitarian or just a human decency type of thing. Do you think it's okay for one country to fund a terrorist organization and then entice them to attack so you can have your ongoing war because you don't want a two-state solution, and then you get a whole bunch of people in this country? We're thousands of miles away from that, but yet we remain fully, this government and our defense contractors and everything else remain fully engaged in this situation and harming thousands upon thousands of little kids that have probably never picked up a rifle or thought, I hate America or I hate Israel. They're too young to know it yet. They're babies. They're toddlers. They're 5-year-olds. And they're piled under the rubble of buildings. And I'm supposed to go, way to go, Netanyahu. You the man. I can't do that. I can't do it.
Well, even peace with Israel is not peace. Because I was actually very shocked. I woke up, I don't remember if it was last week. I think it was last week, or maybe even earlier this week. But I woke up to see the news that Israel and Lebanon had came to a ceasefire, that there was a peace agreement between Lebanon and Israel. And within hours, Israel had broke that peace agreement and was bombing Lebanon again. Within hours. So even peace with Israel is not peace. You go back to the Camp David talks under Bill Clinton, and when they were negotiating a two-state solution. In the details of that, it basically said Israel was on its own time frame to do it, with no guarantees and no incentives for Israel to actually create a two-state solution. So basically, all they did was the Israeli government came to America and said, basically, like, had their fingers crossed behind their backs going, we're going to create a two-state solution for Palestine and Israel. Wink. And the whole time they knew they didn't mean it. They were never going to do it. And there was nothing in that deal, in that structure, to put any time, like, to force the Israeli government to actually follow through. And that's why the leader of the Palestinians at the time refused to sign that agreement. That's why he didn't. And it gave the media everything they needed to go, see, these guys don't want peace. They don't want actual peace. It's because Israel never means peace. They never mean it. They are the biggest liars on the world stage. They'll say whatever they can to garner support from whoever they can to continue to force the Palestinians out of their homes. And it's been happening for decades, and it's just sad that very recently it's even been controversial to bring this stuff up.
I, was listening to somebody the other day, and, we hear this slogan at times from our politicians, and not just ours, but others around the world. Probably Israel's probably one of those, is peace through strength. That slogan's been thrown around for a long time. Now, I believe that if you have a strong military for defense of your homeland, that's fine. I have no problem with you having a strong national defense so that nobody has the cojones to come attack you because they know that's a suicide mission. I have no issue with that at all. But this peace through strength strategy that they like to throw around is not in the context of what I would say it is. It is, we don't like what they're doing, so we're going to go spread freedom dust everywhere in the forms of bullets and bombs. And because their leader's not going along with the program. They're not selling the oil to us at whatever price, or they won't allow development of a natural gas pipeline, or they won't allow our infrastructure into the country. So then we have to make up lies about how big of it. And the person there, the leader might be a dictator, but he's not literally doing anything wrong to any of us in the household, in the house or the car or whatever you're in right now listening to this show. They have literally done nothing to us. And this, we got to have peace through strength. How about peace through diplomacy? Can we try that? Yeah, Tom March says freedom dust. Got to snort me some of that. Yeah, we all need to snort us some freedom dust. But I hate the fact that they use the phrase peace through strength and then use bully tactics after that. It's like that is not peace through strength at all.
Also, like the United States is very friendly with the Jordanian government, very friendly with the Egyptian government, very friendly with some African nations, all dictators, all of them guilty of committing crimes against their people and infringing on the rights and the way of life on their people. Do we care? No. Why? Because like you just said, those people are willing to give us their resources and allow American privatization, the private businesses to go in and swoop resources and take advantage of the land and the people. And so that's why we're okay. In Egypt, they buy a lot of our weapons. We give them aid, and they take that aid and buy our weapons. But same with the Jordanians. Like they're in the club. So it doesn't matter what they do to their people. They're in the club. And if you're not in the club, you get treated like Assad. You get treated like the Ayatollah. You get treated like the Hezbollah and Lebanon. Like that's how you get treated if you're not part of the club. But if you're part of the club, it doesn't matter what you do to your people. Like you can commit atrocities. If you're the president of Ukraine, you can shut down religion, shut down freedom of the press. You can stop having elections. Why? Because you're in the club.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact phrase from this comedian Eddie Izzard, where he said something about, if somebody kills a person, you put them in jail. If they kill 3 people, you execute them. If they kill 10 of them, you put them behind you look through them at a glass window because they committed or whatever. But it's like Hitler, he invaded other countries. They're like, whatever. He's like, when he started killing his own people, they're like, stupid man. And sometimes that's the way our country does things. Like if a country's attacking another country that's not friendly to us, we're like, oh, that's great. But as soon as they do something that's not in line with our policy, and then they do something to their own people, or we make up the fact that they're doing something to their own people, then we're like, oh, stupid dictator. We're going to have to step in and blow up a bunch of your stuff, and then spread an ungodly amount of lies throughout the media, and to where half the world thinks you're the most evil person on the planet, and you may not even hold a candle to the most evil people on the planet.
So one of the perfect examples of what we're talking about is Saddam Hussein.
Yes.
Like when Saddam Hussein wanted to fight the Iranian government when the Ayatollah took back over in 1980, we were all on board. Like, oh, Saddam Hussein, we like Saddam Hussein. The CIA helped get him installed in the first place. Yeah, he's one of our boys. And then when his country was $40 billion in debt at a time when that was a ton of money, and they were having debates over the Rumaila oil fields in the shared lands between, and in a contested border internationally, by the way, which was the Kuwaiti border with Iraq. And then Iraq was basically just asking for help from anyone that would help them. They're like, we're in debt. We can't pay we're having a hard time paying our debt because we went to a war that you guys told us to start, that Saudi Arabia greenlit at the time. He felt pressured, and he felt the need to go into Kuwait to save his empire and save his people, not necessarily his people, but to save his government. He went into Kuwait basically to have them stop harvesting all of the oil from their shared oil fields. So what did we do? We spread a bunch of lies that he was murdering babies and that he was getting ready to invade Saudi Arabia. So then we could start a 10-year campaign on destroying basically the entire country of Iraq.
Yep. Well, with a little less than 5 minutes to go, we're gonna close this up. And Brandon, I totally forgot to email or text message you this earlier today, so I apologize. I know you'll be cool with what I'm about to say, but I forgot to text you. I do have lined up next week Tom Martz and Catherine Dreher to come on the show. So we're going to have 4 people on here next week, and Brandon and I will do our best to give plenty of time to Catherine and Tom to talk Missouri politics. We'll talk some national politics, and we'll try to give everybody a fair amount of time to talk, but it is something I'm really looking forward to. So Catherine Dreher and Tom Martz will be joining us next Friday here on the Missouri Liberty Report. So I hope you all tune in for that, because that will be an outstanding show. Brandon, we got 3 minutes left. Something you want to close the show out with?
No. If you haven't seen it, there was a huge blowout in the House floor between the current actor of the Secret Service. The new leader of the Secret Service had a heated argument with a member of Congress over him trying to wedge his way into this photo shoot to the detriment and the safety of the president and the vice president, Harris and Biden. And it's hilarious if you haven't seen it. So I would try to find that if you haven't. Full on screaming, pointing match. Well worth the watch.
Oh, that sounds, that's my kind of entertainment, watching stupid people get upset at each other and causing some friction and getting all upset with each other. Sometimes watching idiots battle it out on the internet is some of the most entertaining stuff that I can find during the day. Sometimes you see something, you're like, somebody's getting ready to screw around and find out. And I can't wait to see what happens in the end of this video. But anyway, folks, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Again, thanks so much to all of you who watch on YouTube or Rumble, listen via podcast or radio. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Again, next week, I've got it cinched up, Tom Martz and Catherine Dreher. Tom Martz from the Locke and Smith Foundation. He's been on the show several times. Catherine has also been on the show several times. In fact, she joined us a couple weeks ago to talk for a little bit about Justin Sparks and his run for Speaker of the House here in the Missouri House. So that is going to be a great show, a lot of great content. And for those of you who have never heard Tom Martz before, you are going to really enjoy his brutal honesty at times. I guarantee you that, and his humor. So going to be a great show. Again, thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week right here on the Missouri Liberty Report.